When looking back into the history and foundations of the churches in Gilmer County, there are several elements of the story to consider. First was the Native American people and what their relationship was with the first missionaries to the area. Then we look at the missions that were built and what they were used for. Finally, we can look at the first actual churches that were built and some of the tangible historical pieces that are still around that we can experience.
They always had a religion. All Native Americans always believed that there was one God creator. But of course, when most of the white intruders, as they called them, came, they felt that the Native Americans were heretics and that they needed to have the white man's religion forced upon them. So about 1800s, 1810 or so, there was a compact that was written for the federal government to bring in the American Board of Foreign Religion into this Indian territory. And they brought different religious factions in to see if they could impress upon the Indians the need for being religious peoples.
The American Board of Commissioners of Foreign Missions was established by members of the Congregational Church at Andover Seminary in Massachusetts. They sent members into Native American territories because they believed that Native American souls could be saved by conversion. Another goal was to educate the Native Americans and their children.
The missionaries were brought in and told that all they could do was teach the children to read and speak English and to do their sums, math, and to learn to do crafts and things.
As the missionaries began spending more time with the Cherokees, they were impressed and surprised at the Cherokees' ability to learn. In particular, Evan Jones, one of the area's first missionaries.
And, here he'd been told all of his life how dumb Indians were and, the politics that got involved with all that. And he would, along with some of the other ministers that were in the area, they would educate these children to a certain point, 8th grade level, and send them back east to Connecticut to go to school and finish out their education there. So there are quite a few missionary records that show that.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine.
When we look at the first missions built in the area, it is important to note that Gilmer County was much larger at that time. It extended from the top half of what is now Pickens County all the way to the North Carolina-Tennessee state line.
The first mission was at Tulone, which is probably 30 miles to the north of what you know as the Carmel Mission, which is at 136 and Highway 515 at this point. There is a marker there, which is actually across the street from where the Carmel Mission was. The Tulone Mission was in a house to start with. The house burned down and they moved it about 15 miles closer to the Carmel Mission, and I think that's probably why they have some confusion, because it was on the route.
The confusion started when a second mission was built nearby called Lower Tulone. The name later changed to Carmel Mission around 1824.
Carmel Mission was the longest lasting one in this area, and from that you had a lot of the people who had migrated from North Carolina into North Georgia actually went there to learn how to be doctors and how to do other things within the community.
Oh, that wooden church house out on a hill.
So the first churches that were started in the area. You had over 19 of them in Gilmer County. They were all within the communities, which were militia districts that were divided out. This is where people would come and they would be assigned by the federal government to train the Native Americans that lived in those various communities and to learn how to do the agriculture and raise livestock and protect the area.
The first church built in Gilmer County was Cartacay Methodist. Methodists in the Cartacay area of Gilmer County began to worship under a brush arbor before the first building was erected in August of 1834. The first building was most likely a log structure which later burned. The second building of the Cartacay Methodist Church was erected in 1859 out of virgin pine timber, hand-hewn and planed. As was the custom of the day, the church was built with 2 entrance doors, one on the left for women and the other for men. The congregation was divided by the issues that divided the nation during the war between the states. Often during that period, the men of Cartacay Methodist Church brought their shotguns and spent the night in the church building to protect it from their enemies who had deserted their church for the northern branch. Ridgeway Baptist Church was formed in 1850. This original log structure still stands and is a prime example of the church structures that were first built long before brick and mortar were used.
It's quite interesting. Bricks were not really used to start with. All of the churches were what they call shiplap construction, which is, if you ever look at how a ship is constructed, it laps over, not tongue and groove. They had very uncomfortable pews, no cushions, straight back, and they were mostly separated, men on one side, women on the other, children at the very front.
Oh.
And there was a barrister that stood up there with a hooked staff, which he would bop the kids on the head if they were not paying attention.
No.
So, yeah, that's an interesting aspect of how the churches were run at that particular point in time. Most of the churches were heated with a potbelly stove, and you had lights that were kerosene or acetylene. They were on ropes that they could let down so they could light them and raise them back up.
There is a belief that a church is not a building, but the people who make it what it is. At the first missions, the early missionaries formed deep and respectful relationships with the Cherokee people, the majority protesting the removal of their neighbors. Then the newcomers established the churches in their districts, which were used as schools, places to worship, gather together, and support each other in their new lives. When we are able to visit these churches or places where they once stood, we are able to get a sense of the life our fellow humans lived and the impact that they had on each other and their newly formed communities. These buildings are a reminder of our ancestors' continued influence of our present communities.